I'll be honest, I haven't read anything Holocaust related for at least, let me try to think, I'm 35, 33 right now. I went to Poland when I was 16, and I think that was the last time I approached anything like a movie or a book or anything related to the Holocaust. So I was hesitant to the experience, but I think it was a fantastic book. I'm very happy I was brave enough to read it, and I would love to hear from all of you, and then I can just share some general thoughts on the book as well. So whoever wants to start just with a general appreciation on the book, and we can roll that way.
So I guess I can start.
Yeah. Sure.
When my husband was reading the book through Audible, he kept telling me what a great book it was throughout the entire time he was reading it. And I, like you, have a hard time sometimes going down that road. When I was in high school, I overdosed on everything Holocaust.
I feel the same way.
I was so caught up in it. And then when Steven Spielberg's movie came out, Schindler's List, I couldn't see it. I wasn't emotionally strong enough. Mm-hmm. I had just had a baby and I was hormonal and I didn't want to do it. So this is also one of the few times I've gone back down that road again. And it really was a good book. Mm-hmm. I really, and the writer was so creative, piecing it all together mm-hmm. and making it into a real life for us to understand. So, yeah. Okay, I'm done.
No, awesome. Great. Anyone else, just general appreciation on the book?
Well, it helped that the title, you knew they were going to survive.
Right.
So I could, deal with just knowing, okay, they're going to be all right at the end. Mm-hmm. I felt like it did give you that much. I usually read at night, and there were some chapters I couldn't read. It really just stayed with me. The cold, what do you call it?
Siberia.
Oh my God. Here I am with 4 covers and my feet are cold and I'm like miserable. So I'm not really, but I'm thinking of I could never have survived that.
Right.
And then I thought other scene that was really scary and upsetting was the where they is it Bella, the other one with the girl,
Mirren and
yes, they signed up to go to America and it was really an execution. That was very harrowing.
Miller.
To read. And I'd always like to end on one of Addie's chapters, at least because it just seemed more of a fantasy getaway. Right. It wasn't easy, but it was better than everybody else.
Right. At least physically, the unknown, we cannot understand what that must have been. But I mean, he was living a happy life in theory, at least physically. Yeah. Versus,
and we know the author really had most information.
Right. Yeah. He was the central, like the way I saw it is like the emotional development of the book is through Addie's life. Then there is physical development through all of the other characters, but we really in depth socialize with him. We connect with mm-hmm. him, and it's somehow his perspective. And at the end, you read that it's like he's the grandfather of the author, and she's for sure more close to him than anyone else. So everything makes sense again.
Yeah. And the book could have been 3 different books too. Mm-hmm. And it did seem like they all just got away. I mean, they just They were just really lucky.
Right.
And that is the title of the book,
Right.
but they were just so lucky.
Right.
You know, climbing over the Alps too.
Right.
All over.
She was pregnant. We didn't know, but like
Mm.
she, yeah, I mean, wow, incredible. Any other just general thoughts on the book?
Well, it was amazing that they all
Pictures
survived.
with many locations with the whole.
Oh, no, that's all right. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Go ahead, Susan, I think.
Oh, well, I've had been lucky enough to have a lot of contact with a lot of survivors, and I've read a lot of survivor memoirs, but never have I experienced an entire family who survived.
Uh-huh.
And it's almost not believable that it's possible that every family member. And I know that she put the story together from the conversation she had with her grandfather. But what I want to know is, did all of those things really happen
Right.
to
How much
the
it-
parents and the siblings? Yeah.
It's
So
not a
how-
memoir. It's based on a real
Yeah.
story. The way I was reading a few interviews with her specifically, the way I understood is that she had the historical fact, and then she based the context, like the feelings or the pressure or the fear,
Right.
on interviews with survivors, or Yad Vashem helped her a lot, or all these real sources of what the experience were in very similar situations.
She did an
Because- Right.
enormous amount of research.
Right.
That was very impressive.
Yeah, the amount of research, yeah. Which also made me think that any Holocaust book coming forward, I mean, not all of them, but this person was, I mean, I don't know, like 5-10 years older than me, and it's a new voice of the Holocaust. Is people talking about their grandparents, or people trying to put together family events, and less that first voice. I mean, we have so many recordings, and like we have Spielberg and all these sources have done amazing jobs to try to capture as much as possible. But this is just an example of a voice that is not even a second generation. It's a third generation from the Holocaust, and still wanted to keep that alive and that story alive.
I'm sorry, I don't want to hog that time, but I'm a docent at the Bremen Museum, and once a month there's a meeting of all of the docents, which now of course is online on Zoom. But it was very interesting that last week the topic was the stories that the grandchildren of survivors know, and how the memories of the grandparents are shaped through what the grandparents tell the grandchildren, plus exactly what this author did is to embellish the parts that she didn't, the feelings that she couldn't know, and then that becomes their story. And
Right?
yeah, and it's a new thing. It's a new thing in Holocaust
History,
memoir.
right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, I hope more books still coming up. I hope we're not done necessarily. I mean, and again, I recognize I haven't been able to read most of the books post, I don't know, 2000, but still it's good that they're still coming. So we can jump into a first topic. If anyone wants to say anything, always just please jump in. But I didn't know whether to start with this or end with this, but let's start. So we'll see. We were the lucky ones, and Charna, you touch on the topic, on the fact that like we feel that it's luck, but then before I read the book, I'm like, okay, good that this is the name of the book, because attributing survival to a whole family to anything beside luck, it seems unfair. It seems like any attribute you would give them, probably millions of other Jews had it as well, and they weren't lucky enough to survive. So it almost feels like that's the only possible title. But then when I was reading the story, and I guess I tend to do this, and I'm sure we all tend to do this, but you tend to put yourself on that situation. And it's like, I wouldn't have been able to survive, A, and B, to be that creative or that, I don't know, like we were talking about the scene where Mira is with the daughter. She's like, it's a terrible scene. She's preparing to die pretty much. And she sends the daughter back to the train. And I'm like, how she haven't eaten, she's been walking, she was in the train for all these days, she had this like boldness to do this, and like the strategy and the help Alina all through the book, they're so strategic that I was like, when I finished the book, I was debating, was it really luck, or was it that something else that they had that was able to keep them alive? And I don't know what. I would love to hear your thoughts, because I'm struggling with this concept myself.
Go ahead, Adele.
Well, you talk about survive. Like, I know when I myself visited Auschwitz, it was so cold. It was back in the 90s, I think, before, there were tours of young people coming through. It was just, nobody there really, except my daughter and myself. And here I am in my LL Bean and my parka and my, all these warm clothes. I just thought I wouldn't have been able to survive. I was barely warm enough, at Auschwitz. I just don't think I would have survived. I don't think I would have survived the train ride. When Helena and her cousin Franca fall in that icy river, and then they get out and talk to these soldiers, I think I would have just died of hypothermia. I just don't see how I could have survived any of these scenarios.
Well, I give credit to our human nature to survive at all cost. No matter what, we are survivors until we can't. And I just, I felt the same way when they were in that ice cold water and they got out and they were in soaking wet clothing, but they knew they had no choice. And that same thread ran through all the different scenes with the different characters, that they all had a reason to survive. They did not want to give up. They said, they wanted to reunite with their family. They wanted to see their parents again and their siblings, and they would go to a happy place in their mind, sitting at the piano and family gatherings. They had a way to survive. And that's, I don't know, maybe that's the old thing, survival of the fittest. Maybe it's mental fittest, I don't know. I don't know why some did and some didn't. But yeah, that scene by the train where they dug their graves and she had this quick thought. I had no idea that people were able to survive and get away with little tricks like that.
Right.
I just figured any false move, you get a bullet. So I just, that was amazing to me. So, and I don't think that the author would have made that up.
They were bold. I mean, escaping the ghetto, just like, hey, 6 p.m. is the time the doors open. They had that boldness, definitely. But again, like, how many others share these values or share this desire to reunite with their families? And at the end of the day, was it luck? I don't know. Hi, Eve.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
No worries. We just brought up the first topic after discussing the book in general about the title itself of the book. We were the lucky ones. And yeah, so we're discussing that concept, luck versus strategy or grit, or
Okay.
what was it?
Ariela, the survivors I know, everyone has said to me that the reason they survived was because they felt that there was something they had to do. There was something that some person that they needed to reunite with, some mission that they hadn't accomplished, and that the thought of what they would do after the war is what kept them going.
Mhm.
And so the other thing that they have all told me is that they feel it was absolutely sheer luck that one person would have lived, one person would have died. And this family was, you know, fairly assimilated. They had been educated, so they hadn't been cloistered, you know, just in a little shtetl. They understood with the outside world, you know, the mentality of it. And I think that may have helped.
Right.
But the harrowing, as the ladies have said, the harrowing escapes, the frozen river, the train, I think the will to survive is very strong, and we don't know about it.
Yeah.
We don't know about it.
I'm trying to remember, Bella's family perished, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
But we were never really introduced to members of her family in the book.
Just the
Anna?
sister, Anna,
Uh-huh.
she was present on the wedding, and we witnessed her wedding when they went, when they left
Dark
Radom.
house.
Yeah. So a little bit, I mean, we knew a little bit about the parents. She sent a few letters, but we never learned about their family dynamics per se. We knew Anna was a younger sister. We knew a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that definitely the spouses of the family, they all had their horrible tragedies. I mean, without exception. I mean, Radome was a 30,000 Jewish population and 300 survived. So like 5% of the survivals were part of one nuclear family. I mean, it doesn't, there's no rationale behind it. That's why, again, like the title of the book seems good and seems okay. And like, I almost, out of respect of all the victims, I was like, I hope they understand this was pure luck. But then when you read it, you're like, they had something on them that kept them being very creative in the worst circumstances, and they just kept fighting. It's a hard, I don't know. I always went back to the title as I was reading the book. I thought it was an interesting choice of words by the author.
Well, you know, one thing that just to how I related to the book, you know, it was each chapter was by, you know, it started out in 1939, and then the different months, and then 40, and so, you know, I was born in 42. So when I would read something about 39, I said, oh, I wasn't born yet. And it would go to, oh no, I wasn't born yet. So I'm waiting to get up to August 42 when I was born. You know, I'm trying to see what happened just prior to the years of my birth. Yeah.
Wow, crazy, yeah. And again, like part of that survival, and I don't want to necessarily talk about the family in contrast of other people that didn't survive. I don't think this necessarily lacked on other people, but the concept, so again, we discussed, they were a very assimilated family. They weren't religious. At some point they were talking about a party they had right after the Seder, in which they were eating cake and drinking champagne, which again, they were assimilated to a Polish culture, but the value of the family itself that the parents put on the kids, it was whatever they were doing, they were always worried about the rest of the family. They were always back, their minds were always back to it. And even like we were saying, like Adi was like the happy character, kind of like the easy life through the war. The mental just struggle just by always being back to Radom and being back to that house and being back to that piano and being back to that Rosh Hashanah or Seder night. It meant it was it made me feel of my family. I grew up in Latin America with that concept of like families is just the key, and it doesn't matter. It's not about necessarily religious experience. It's just what it is. So what role do you think, if and not only talking about survival itself, just in general, the role of the family in the book?
That was also part of what gave them the strength to get through all those hardships.
Right. Like the faith of potentially going back to their families.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump way into Addie's life for just a second, because I have a question about, I guess it's Caroline,
Yes.
the woman he ended up marrying. I got the distinct feeling that she came from Jewish roots but didn't know it. There was something that she said about names of people in her family, and they seem to have a traditional Jewish thread.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't know because her parents were dead and she had nobody to ask. I guess they didn't have ancestry.com yet.
I don't think she's Jewish.
Yeah,
So-
I don't think he, I mean, the way I saw it is that he totally assimilated. Their three kids grew up at some point that they mentioned they're Christian. I don't know exactly, they mentioned which church, but they grew up Christians. I don't know. It was so happy they survived, but the end of his story, it gave me a little bit of like, and you cannot control it. And I'm like trying to rationalize it as like, it went through hell. Like, how can you ever judge him? I'm not judging him. I promise I'm not judging him. But that like pain of like, they don't even know they're Jewish, it's, I don't know. I didn't get that feeling. I got the feeling that he just fell in love with her and she was extremely kind and just a good person.
Yeah, no, they just had chemistry. They
Right,
just
yeah.
clicked.
Yeah.
Well, also
all
he
the
noticed, oh, go ahead, Adele.
All the 5 children had been sent to Catholic school, if you recall. The parents had been quite, comfortable, and they sent the kids to Catholic school, to the best schools. But the kids still identified as Jewish.
You're talking about the original Crook,
Yeah, the original
Kirk.
parents.
Yeah.
the Kirk family.
They sent their children to the best schools, the Catholic schools. But, the family just were very strongly Jewish, spending every Rosh Hashanah together, every Passover. I mean, they didn't lose that, even having been to Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say with Addie, he was able to give his thoughts about Eliska and why that didn't work out. He knew he couldn't talk about his feelings.
Right.
And his mother would say, he told us how he thought what his mother would say, something about you'll know, or you have to be able to be yourself.
It's a lie. If there is a lie, it's not real love or something along
Okay.
those lines.
And he knew that, and then the relationship ran its course, and
Mm-hmm.
Caroline could.
Right.
It was like such a weight off his shoulders to be able to be with someone that,
Right.
he could talk about his family.
I wonder whatever happened to that embroidered hanky.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but then again, I think really what destroy or whatever, like that first relationship that Adi had is the fact that he wasn't able to connect to his family. And it goes back to the importance that anywhere they were, it was, I need to get back to them. I need, and for example, Alina, who really was the heroine, like she really was the one that kept the family together. And I mean, it may have been mostly Adam's activities as the just able to find all these documents, and that helped. But she would go back into the ghetto, into the cities, into all these, just to help her family. And again, I'm not trying to say that this is not at all as like other people in the Holocaust didn't have that love for their families. They probably 90% had the exact same love. It's just that they had that plus the resources and the strategy and it, but the family is what I don't know. I kept it. I kept using this little like tree at the beginning of the book, like at least till like half the book.
I did
No,
too. I just,
to
Oh,
see
yeah.
who was who, and then I almost use it as an analogy, like as like it just kept them together. You know, they were part of one structure.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I bought a used copy of this book, and there's notes all over that family tree. Like there's notes about who married who and
Oh,
whose children, and yeah.
Nice. That's so good. Wow. Awesome. Another topic that again I think for my personal experience of living in many countries and having my own identity, it surprised me is that and this again may have helped them, but beyond, I don't think it was as a strategy for them, is the level of nationalism they had and like the love for Poland and the land and it wasn't many generations ago or years even where still pogroms were happening in Poland and anti-Semitism. Maybe they were very well integrated into society, but anti-Semitism was around Poland everywhere at the time. So what was your sentiment or your experience where they would like risk their lives just to not be called something else but Polish, or they were so proud to be able to fight for the army and defend Poland? What was your thought about that?
you know, it's interesting because it brought to mind, I have, my family, part of my family came from Poland. And I think it was my father. He wasn't from Poland. It was my mother's side. But he used to say that Jewish people are not from Poland are not Polish. They aren't the Polish people. That the Polish people were not the Jews of Poland. And that the Poles were not good, were not nice to the Jewish people. And so, you know, that was my very early years of always wondering about Poland. You know, I figured, hey, if you're born there, that's who you are. But I don't know. It's weird. I'm born in America. I'm American, yet I identify with the roots of my people,
Well,
which
you know,
is
Yannick, he wouldn't sign that paper saying that he was no longer Polish, that I am a Soviet citizen. He wouldn't agree
right.
to say that.
Right.
But that's what got him deported, you know, was insisting that I'm Polish. He wouldn't, you know, give up his Polish identity.
Yeah, and we learned later Selim had the same. I mean, Selim disappeared for 200 pages of the book. We knew it wasn't dead, but we thought potentially it could have been. But
Sullivan,
it was
the
the same.
brother-in-law,
It was the same reason.
the doctor.
The doctor, yes, who ended up also in Siberia, also in Russia, and at a time, and yeah. So we have two characters that. I mean, again, it may have helped them at the end. There's no question that probably being in Poland, it was just the worst possible place to be. But the moment they decide to fight against the Russians, it was definitely a risk. And they were proud. They were proud to be Polish. And I don't know, I think about today, when I was trying to read all these questions, trying to research like what are good questions for a book club, a lot of the questions are, I think, are geared towards not Jewish people, like what type of values you would want to pass your kids about this. And we live through these values, like it's different, but this was something that stick to me. Like, is this something we should pursue, like feeling that we belong and feeling that we love the country we live in, independent of where it is in the globe, or is being too comfortable is almost like dangerous? I don't necessarily have an answer. I would love to hear your experience or thoughts on this, but the book definitely made me think about that balance or contrast.
I think with Genek and Salim, when he refused to, remember that the Poles and the Russians at that time hated each other. They hated each other. They were enemies. So for him to have sworn allegiance to the Soviet Union, the sworn enemy of Poland, makes sense that he wouldn't have done it. It wouldn't have occurred to him that they were going to send him to Siberia. Otherwise, he would have said, fine. But that's different. So but today, it's always the question with people: are you an American Jew or are you a Jewish American? And people see it from two sides. And now that we're blessed to be alive when the state of Israel exists, then that puts a whole different spin on where your country, where you live. So, and I think that in the part of the book, I mean, just in the context of the time period of when it was that he wouldn't have declared himself a Soviet citizen, just because of the historical relationship at that time.
Right.
That's interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think even at that time, the Jews above a certain income level who were living in Germany, meaning the ones that weren't sort of very like super religious, and the ones that were wealthier, they identified as German first.
Right.
I think it's the same kind of thing. They couldn't believe what was happening because they said, well, we're German. This is going to pass.
Right. And then it's hard to think whether, I mean, we have those, we again, like, we get too comfortable in a new place. It's human nature. You want to belong. You want to belong with the people around you, So, I mean, Israel brings a whole different layer to these like dual type of, like, we're always like Jews. My father in Chile he's in politics. He has had like high positions in the government, and that has always come up as like, are you more loyal to these or to that? Like, how is your loyalty like level? Jews, I mean, I think in America it's a little bit less of an issue, but it's less of an issue because we're better integrated. I don't know. It's always it's hard to now. And again, with Israel is one more layer. It's like, we don't need to choose. Like, no one is putting like a level, like making us choose. But like in the back of my mind, I'm always like, whatever happens, we have Israel.
I know.
Yeah, and
So-
that's
Plan B.
Right.
So now with what's going on in our own country, it actually frightens me and brings to mind a lot of what you just said. We are all Americans, but in the eyes of these crazy militia people and whatever other titles they give themselves, we're Jews first. And they'll come after us because we're Jews.
Right.
And it's frightening to think history could repeat itself. You have a very crazed, emotional crowd of people with a crazy leader who will do anything.
Right.
So,
I mean, we have no historical reason to believe history is not going to repeat itself. It's just because it's just the fact that we are, by nature, we forget, and it's probably good. We don't need to necessarily want to live with the trauma of hundreds of generations, but history has repeated itself one time again. So I wonder, if part of what we're talking before, it's just human nature, and you need to belong in the land you're leaving, independent whether it's Poland or it's the US today, or I don't know. I'm sure Jews living in South Africa feels very proud to be in South Africa, wherever it is,
the majority.
I gave just an example. But yeah, so I don't know. That is specific pride, but then the contrast of Georgia saying that no one of that first generation was able to go back to Poland. She was the first. So they would have given their life, or they were able to risk and willing to risk so much for Poland. And then they saw the war and they saw what happened. And once they were out of there, they don't want to be back. And that's not part, I mean, it's part of their identity, but they have had enough. Even with Europe, someone were saying that they wouldn't even go back to Europe as a whole, you know? So I wonder, to what stretch we have that type of like pride or loyalty to the country. But that, I mean, those were just some general topics on the book. I think there are certain characters or elements of the book itself that we all had our characters. I mean, probably our favorite characters, or the ones that shocked us the most or represent us the most. For me, Alina was the one that made it possible for their family to survive. And the interesting thing that she had, and I think because I'm as far as anyone can be of having this quality, that caught my attention so much.
Who found the place for the parents?
She had her own set of rules. She didn't live by anyone's rules. Since she was young, apparently she wasn't about following their parents as they said, but like when it comes to the war itself, which is the experience we saw, there were very strict rules in social schemes that were happening, and she was always willing to break them. And with the boldness of being just, I mean, she had the looks of not being Jewish that definitely play in her favor. But like starting when she went to take Adam out of the camp, like, do you think I'm not German? Look at me, you know, like who did that, you know? And then from there on, just that idea of like, I put the rules and I go by my own rules, I think was just something that shocked me and made me think a lot about how I'm very different to that type of character. Do you feel there's one character, it can be Alina specifically with this topic, of or something else that like really shocked you or made you almost like evaluate like how would one react, which I think it's like a natural human tendency to be like, what would have been my reaction? But is there any character that caught your eyes the most?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's the character that caught my eye the most, but it was one of those feel-good moments in the book, is when Addie was on the ship and he was able to sneak in to the upper class lounge and started playing the piano.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought some levity to a heavy life that all these people were feeling. And that was just, I liked how he did that. And, but I think as far as like someone who was faced with such a challenge, I think it was Mila and her little girl.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I mean, right from the beginning, taking her into the factory with her and keeping her strapped to her chest and hiding her. And this little girl was so obedient. It was incredible.
Right.
That this toddler didn't want to go running around all over the place. She listened to her mother,
Right.
having to stay home alone all day long, over and over again. I would love to know what happened with that little girl in her life.
I think she has a Wikipedia page, I think.
Oh, really?
Felicia, I think you can find information on her.
Yeah.
She is the one that said in that first family reunion, we were the lucky ones.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
at least we know that about her. But I mean, she left the war at 6 or 7, around that age. I have met, like, I mean, she she wasn't a baby, I'd say like that. She remembers the war. She remembers those events. So yeah, know
That's
how
prob-
she was able to, at some point at the end of the war, Mila says, my daughter has not known any reality that it's not people wanted to kill you just because how you were born. You know, like all the rest had that life they want to go back to, and that life before the war, and that almost illusion that things are better, can be better because they were better. But she didn't have that. This is all she knew. All
She
she
never had a childhood
no,
at all.
they
Oh, many
ran away.
didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, going back to that execution scene, where Mila was she was thinking and thinking and trying to get out of the situation. And she realized when she saw that first lady go up that, you have to have something to give, like there was a dentist, and she was like, I don't have anything to offer. And then she realized she had her wedding ring.
Yeah.
That saved her along with her other smarts. But she got down to the basics of what she needed to get out of there. A lot of her stories were just very difficult.
So my husband and I were on a cruise up in that region, and one of the stopped in Riga. I think, wasn't it Riga? No, Gdansk.
Oh, that's where my grandparents are from, Gdansk.
Wow. Okay, and did they survive the war?
They all came here in, I think the 1890s. My grandfather was a tailor in Chicago, and he made enough money to bring everyone over, I think, except one sister didn't make it.
Well, when we were in Gdansk, we took the Jewish tour, and we saw the memorials, and then they took us to one of those killing zones, one of those places in the forest where they lined people up and just randomly shot people and left them there and in the ditches. And when I was,
This was not good.
that wasn't Gdansk, where was it?
Riga one.
It was, we did mostly
Latvia.
Latvia, maybe. We did the Jewish tours wherever we would go. And that was, no, there was a concentration camp there.
Mhm.
That's right. And it was like a raw, true, historical, whatever was left over. It wasn't like Disney-fied, like some of the other concentration camps that were cleaned up and made nice for tourists. Well, this wasn't nice. And just so many of the scenes in the book brought me back to that tour I was on. And, it wasn't cold weather, so I didn't feel that cold that I think that Hannah was talking about. But I don't know. It was very real when I was reading the book about, when they were digging the graves. And anyway, has anyone else been over to that area?
I did the March of Living. It was April, and the cold. I laugh because it's like, it's in the book, every time like April comes, it's like they're happy because summer, or at least it's livable weather, like
Right.
survivable weather. And I remember having like 2 North Face and couldn't handle on the cold. But yeah, so I mean, again, I wasn't in this specific, I wasn't in Radom specifically, but I was in Poland, and through many ghettos in which today, I mean, all those houses they have, I mean, Polish people living on them. There's no more Jewish quarter anywhere, pretty much. I mean, now there's some sort of Jewish life, but minimum. And you still can see the shaded area where the mezuzah would be in every single door. And it's every door. It's like you would walk and walk and walk for just miles, and every single door you would go up and just like these 3-story, they tend to be like these 3-4-story buildings, very old buildings. Every single door had just the mark of the mezuzot, and to think how Jewish those places were, I don't think like we can imagine how Jewish, but yeah, I used that as a place to go back when I was reading the book. I mean, they didn't live in the Jewish area, they lived in the more wealthy area. We learned that about this family specifically, which one of the questions again that I just read as recommendation questions for a book club by the author was, do you think that being secular helped them or hurt them? And I was like, I read that. Sometimes I read some questions before I read the book so I can have them in mind, through the book. I was, for sure it hurt them. But then when I read the book, I felt the opposite. I felt in their case, having that, and there are a few times in which they knew these things that the Polish people used to say, that probably Jews weren't taught, that because they went to a non-Jewish school, they knew, their knowledge on the society was a help. But that was when I was reading the book, I went back in my head to like these ghetto and these areas in Poland, and after that is when I never went back to read or do anything Holocaust related. But definitely happy I was able to read this book. Absolutely. Yeah. So any other character or time in the book that someone felt close or connected or challenged? I mean, I feel Alina challenged me in good ways, that's good about a book. That's things we want to feel.
Yeah.
The book does refer to Jewish life going back to World War I. They mentioned hiding out in the basement for 3 years.
Right. So
because of the pogroms during World War I, 3 years in the basement. Oh my God.
I mean, that generation that was between the two wars, that lived both wars, that probably gave them some more resiliency too. But every time I read a Holocaust books, they always start before the war, right? That's 90% or maybe 100%. That time and time again where they start realizing that things are getting worse, and I'm like, just leave, and it keeps getting worse and it keeps getting worse, and then it's too late, and then they're just too late. This happened in this book again, and you're like, they should have not, like, you feel like they live through pogroms over and over again. But again, it's impossible to judge. I don't know if we would know today. I mean, to be honest, it's just human nature.
I think this family felt that because they were secular and they, they had the right connections, that somehow this wouldn't happen to them.
Right.
Somehow she wouldn't end up picking turnips in a field.
Right.
Somehow this
Right.
wouldn't happen to them.
Yeah, that was the first realization, I think, in which it's not going to help me. Whatever I thought I had, it's not relevant anymore. Yeah.
We're talking about my overdose of Holocaust reading in high school. There is one book that left an impression on me for life, and it's a true story, autobiographical, by a woman named Judith Strick Dryden. And I think the name of the book is Judith Strick. I can't remember exactly. But she survived as a teenager, being moved from one concentration camp to another, simply because she could speak so many languages perfectly, fluently. And she kept telling them that they had the wrong person, that, they just the wrong person. And so she made it, and she made it to Israel. It's a really great story if you're ever interested. Judith Strick, Drive-In.
Yeah, I see it here. Judith Strick, a girl called Judith Strick.
That's it, yeah.
I'll put it
And
on the side.
that was so inspirational, and it's probably what caused me to love learning foreign languages. If I ever had.
I'm surprised about some of the members in public, like Helene's a friend from high school, Sylvia, pretended like she didn't recognize Helene when, you know, Helene was in the truck being shipped out to work on the farm. Like Sylvia pretended like she turned her head away, like, I don't know this Jewish woman. And then I thought about her reaction. And then some of the people, it said that villagers would come out to the concentration camp trains to the station and try to offer them food or water, but the soldiers would push them away. You know, so I just was thinking how some people reacted, and some people came forward, and some people retreated.
Right. I
There's-
think, I mean,
There's a very,
Go ahead,
there's a
please.
very interesting museum in Amsterdam. It's resist, collaborate, and then resist, collaborate, and then I forget what they call it, but the third category is just indifference. And it was the reaction of the Dutch people to the Germans in World War II. And it was kind of like, we saw that in the book. You know, you can either be actively part of the Germans, you can try and help the Jews, or you're just like indifferent, you don't notice, as a survival mechanism. And I think that's the three characteristics of how people got through that time. And the museum challenges you, it gives you different scenarios and challenges you to think about what would you have done in those scenarios. It was very interesting.
yeah, again, I mean, we see it from our own lenses and perspective, but like the few examples of non-Jews helping them survive, and it's not only a few. I think we have probably all of them had one or a few situations that the fact that Jacob was able to come to the factory to work with Bella was for a Nazi that did a favor. Alina's boss, who the banker, saved her more than once. I mean, the nuns that took the girl. So that is because the standard was, I want my pound of sugar. Give me my pound of sugar, I'll give you the juice. That just was the standard. And we know that even in the book, it says that even Jews would do it, you know, without knowing the obvious. And Alina's like, are they stupid? They don't know they're going to die anyway. It's like, but the Polish did get the pound of sugar.
But then you had that couple who hid the parents in their crawl space in
Right,
the house.
exactly.
But even for months and months without getting paid, they continued to take care of them.
Right. That is the thing where it's like, are they going to be there? Where are the parents? Yeah. So, and I think that's heartwarming. There is a human nature that is horrible, and there's a human nature. It's part of the same human element, which is care for each other. And what is that few people are able to develop and live through that standard, and most people are just not able to? I don't know. I mean, when I was in Poland, many of the non-Jews that help Jews said, and I don't know how I feel about this, but I'm just going to repeat it, said that they were doing it to be good Christians. So it was God. It was like, this is a value for me. Life is a value for me. It said, that was, I think, the number one reason that people that saved Jews through the war gave to do it. It's because they were following their Christian values, and the Nazis weren't.
It's okay, we'll take it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just, I don't believe religion itself, but maybe was the reason these people, I mean, I don't know, it's a hard, I don't know, this banker, I don't know, like the people in the book, I don't think they, well, the nuns, you can assume they were religious, but the rest of the people, I don't think there was much context.
You know, the irony is that one of the family members noticed that on the belt buckle of the Nazis, it said, you know, that we believe in God or something. I don't know if you remember reading that, but it was on the German belt buckle, like
Mm.
God we trust, or God is on our side, or
Right.
something like
So
that.
I just want to add one little family story of my husband. He was born and raised in Israel. Almost all of his family from Poland perished. The only people who survived were people who weren't there at the time that the war broke out. But he has one first cousin who is 91 now. Her name is Osnat. Her father paid one of his employees to take her in and hide her because he had a feeling of what was coming. And they kept her in their house and they hid her.
Wow.
When she was 14, I think she was 14 or maybe older, I don't remember, but she made her way to Israel by herself. Nobody left in the family, and moved in with my husband and his family, who were very poor and lived in a tiny 2-room apartment. And she stayed with them in the beginning of her new life in Israel. And she wrote her life story. It's all written in Hebrew though, so I can't read it.
So she was the only one after the war realized that the only one in her family.
Yeah, she was the only survivor, right?
Yeah, let me add my 2 cents. Listen,
Please.
you hear my accent. I was born in Israel.
I wasn't born here either, so accents are welcome. It's okay.
And my parents survived because they were Zionists, and they went to Israel in 36. They both came from similar families to the Kurtzes, very wealthy families.
Kirk, yeah.
Kirk. And the whole families were decimated. And Adrian just mentioned the cousin. She's the only survivor on my mother's side. What touched me when I listened to the book was the description of the Seder. In the beginning, there's a description of the family on Seder night. And now it made me think about my family. Wow. But even though my families in Poland were very wealthy, they never changed their name. Kertz is not a Jewish name. So they were more assimilated. They changed the name already to, I don't know, maybe it was.
Yeah, Ben was Sinovich, his family, Sinovich.
Yeah.
But then.
So reading the book, it sort of connected me with my families in Poland based on the stories that I heard as a kid.
Yeah, like you were saying in the beginning, how the grandkids are carrying on the story of the Holocaust survivors of their families. And Ben now carries that story from what he's been told.
Right.
And
you should write it down.
Yeah, I would love to get Osnat's book translated.
Also, what's the name of the director of the movie, famous Jewish?
Schindler? Spielberg.
But my cousin who survived, Spielberg gave a lot of money to record the survivors. And she was one of those, That's told them stories for hours.
Right. That effort, I think it's gonna change the history. In Chile has a lot of survivors because, I mean, it's known and criticized, which it should be, that Chile and Argentina refuge a few Nazis, not a few, many probably. A lot. Yeah. The flip side, which is, I guess, even more important, is that they weren't very careful also with the Jews that would arrive. So many were able, the time that even most countries in the world were closing their entrances to Jewish ships, they never did it, so they were able, I mean, if you were all able to get all the way down there, they would let you in. So ships with Jews kept arriving. I mean, at some point they weren't free anymore to escape, you know, but they came till the 39 and 40. And then again, 45, they didn't need a visa. They didn't need a sponsor. They were able to enter. So the Spielberg initiative had a big impact in Chile as well. There are 200 plus recorders from people, but yeah, it's those type of efforts are going to become books, are going to become stories that we share. But yeah, but I mean, thank you, Ben, for sharing your experience, because I think it contrasts that it was luck. It wasn't that they were secular, or it wasn't that they loved their family, you know, like these were elements that were probably present in many families living in Europe at the time. There were the high class were very educated and were very assimilated. And
Yeah, talking about luck, maybe it's not so much that they were lucky, but had they tried the same strategies to get through whatever dilemma they were in, the luck was the person they were up against.
Right.
That person allowed them to, I guess, get away with it, so to speak.
They were lucky. They were lucky.
Well, they were lucky that was the person they had to deal with, who took the wedding ring, or who, or who helped with the husband and wife working together. That was lucky that those people were in those positions.
right. I also, I mean, again, and this was written, and we could have an hour discussion if we want about the literature decision of the author. I think she was really talented. I like the way it was written, the book, but I don't know how much of this I attribute to her or to historical facts. So again, we're reading from the perspective of the book, but
True.
that feeling that it was a split of a second that made the difference, of like, they got at the door at the exact second and then it closed, and that to me is what I attribute to luck, that. And again, I don't know how much of this is a strategy or how much of this is really luck, but it felt that there were many times where it was a split second in which they just were able to act, and regardless of like the fact that they were starving, and they were able to think and act and get it done. But it definitely, I mean, it was a great recommendation. Thank you for the book idea.
Mhm.
I'm still trying to internalize what I take from it.
It'll stay with you.
I have another recommendation for you.
Okay.
The Nightingale.
I read it.
Yeah.
It's
Read it.
wonderful.
And that's a beautiful book. I read that one. Yeah.
And then going back to the luck discussion, one thing we didn't talk about, this took smarts, but it was also luck. When
Absolutely.
Adam created where he dropped his pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he devised some little bandage thing, and
Oh,
okay, so that was smart, but it stayed on. I mean, it like didn't sweat off, and it stayed on, and it created a look.
Without the lights on.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, he said a second before, like, turn the light off. I'm like, what's gonna happen here?
Yeah.
I knew, and you knew that was coming. I did. I could. Yeah, I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was another levity moment.
They were.
What I was thinking, and not to minimize the book, but one of the things that I was thinking of as I was reading it is, so many of us are sitting here feeling not happy and complaining because we can't see our families, but we know we will.
Right.
And we talk to them and we know where they are and we can Zoom with them. And these people had no idea where their families were.
Exactly.
I just can't imagine that.
Right.
Yeah, I can't imagine that full, wonderful feeling of elation when the Red Cross says, we
Oh,
found
yes.
somebody.
It must be amazing.
From the book, I was like crying. Or just like this feather in Brazil, but like that last feather, like every single member of the family is back.
Yeah.
And I think that's the takeaway. I mean,
Well, you know, something I was impressed about the character is that even under these horrible circumstances, how generous they were. Like she split half her hard-boiled egg with Tomaz, the wagon driver, and then the mothers left a lot of goodies for her neighbor when she was packing up to leave. I just thought, even in the worst circumstances, these people were so generous.
Yeah.
And they lost, you can say, beside their family, they lost everything. But while they were going through the war, that was the only thing they care. So I mean, I think for me, like, it's like that contrast to today. It's like those are the moments we need to cherish the most. And hopefully now the vaccine, I think, is getting more available. We're gonna be able to reunite, but that's what we miss, and that's, I don't know, that should be the focus of our lives, like the way it was for them.
So, okay.
Yeah. So
This
I
is-
mean, 10 minutes past. Sorry about that, but it's hard
Yeah,
to stop the conversation.
I know. We started a few minutes late, so it's just right.
So I was talking a little bit with Rabbi Ari, but as soon as I can get a length conversation with him, we have a 3-4 candidates of books. If you want to recommend, you're always welcome. Otherwise, in a few days, we're gonna let you all know the date and the next book. So I'm looking forward to see you all.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm hoping
Thanks,
for the
Ariela.
last
Very good.
Thank you.
meeting
Thank you.
or not.
Bye, everybody.
It's gonna
Thanks
be
so much.